My name is Ava Sinclair. On my 19th birthday, my mother placed a thick stack of documents in front of me and said that all I had to do was sign my name and everything would work out for the whole family. What she did not know was that, at that moment, I was holding a secret powerful enough to destroy a plan they had been quietly preparing for years. But to understand how things reached that point, we have to go back several years. The summer I turned 13. My grandfather Thomas drove his old dark blue pickup truck to pick me up early in the morning. The road leading into Ashwood Valley wound through towering pine trees. A blanket of fog still covered the hillsides like a giant white quilt. His apple farm sat at the end of a red dirt road. It was not a luxurious place. The wooden house was old. The greenhouse had peeling paint in several places. The fences leaned after years of harsh winters. But to Ava, it felt like a completely different world. A world where she was heard. A world where she felt valued. That day, Grandpa Thomas handed her a small hammer. "Help me fix the fence," he said. Ava nodded. The two of them worked all morning beneath the gentle sunlight. Grandpa never rushed her. He patiently taught her every little task: how to recognize rotten wood, how to tie steel wire, how to test the soil before planting new trees. By noon, Grandma Eleanor had fresh apple pie waiting on the kitchen table. The smell of cinnamon and butter filled the entire house. Those moments slowly became some of the most precious memories of Ava's childhood. As evening approached, the two of them sat on the porch, looking out over rows of apple trees stretching all the way to the foot of the hills. The sunlight painted the valley in brilliant shades of gold and orange. Then Grandpa Thomas suddenly spoke. "One day, this place will need someone to protect it." Ava laughed. "Me?" He did not answer right away. Instead, he looked toward the trees swaying gently in the wind. Then he nodded. "Sometimes the person who preserves a place is not the one who owns it. It is the person who truly loves it." At the time, Ava thought he was simply being philosophical, the way he often was. She had no idea he was preparing for the future, a future filled with storms. At home, everything was completely different. Her mother, Diane Sinclair, devoted most of her attention to her younger sister, Lily. Lily had the biggest bedroom, the most expensive gifts, the most praise. Meanwhile, Ava was almost invisible. Even when she earned top marks at school, family dinners quickly shifted back to conversations about Lily. One autumn evening, the farm unexpectedly became the topic of discussion at the dinner table. Mason, Diane's younger brother, was sitting with the family. He placed a glossy folder on the table. "This area is about to experience major development," Mason said. "Resort companies are actively looking for land around here." Ava's mother immediately became interested. "The prices must be going up." Mason smiled. "Very high." Ava watched their eyes light up when they talked about her grandparents' land. Not because they loved the place, but because of the numbers attached to it. A chill ran down her spine. A few months later, Grandpa Thomas died suddenly from a heart attack. His funeral took place beneath heavy rain. Relatives stood beneath the church awning. Everyone wore expressions of grief, or at least they appeared to. While Ava was getting water for her grandmother, she accidentally overheard a conversation behind the hallway. Mason was speaking with Diane. "We need to handle the land situation soon," he said in a lowered voice. "If we wait too long, the opportunity will disappear." Diane nodded. "I know, but we have to wait for Mom." Mason glanced toward the casket, then looked back at her. "We've already waited long enough." Ava froze. Her grandfather had just been laid to rest, and yet the only thing they seemed to care about was the value of the property. For the first time in her life, she felt that something was deeply wrong. After the funeral, Grandma Eleanor moved back to the farm and lived there alone. Ava began visiting her more often. Every weekend, she helped take care of the trees, clean the greenhouse, inspect the irrigation system. The kinds of tasks nobody else in the family cared about. One afternoon in late spring, Grandma Eleanor sat in an old wooden chair on the porch. Her eyes followed the apple trees covered in blossoms. Suddenly, she reached for Ava's hand. Her fingers were thin, but still warm. "Don't let them turn this place into something to be bought and sold." She spoke so softly that Ava almost missed the words. Ava looked at her in confusion. Her grandmother only offered a sad smile, but there was something in her eyes, something that looked very much like worry, as though she could already see a storm approaching, and Ava was the only person who had not seen it yet. If someone asked me which moment completely changed the way I viewed my family, I would not say it was the day my grandfather died. It was not the day my grandmother passed away either. It was the afternoon I found an old box hidden behind a wooden wall inside the greenhouse. I had just turned 18. It had been almost 2 years since Grandpa Thomas passed away, and 6 months since Grandma Eleanor was buried on the hill behind the town church. After she died, the farm became quieter than ever. No more slow footsteps echoing through the house every morning. No more warm apple pies waiting on the kitchen table. There was only Ava and the rows of trees that continued growing with each passing season. Meanwhile, the conversations within the family became increasingly unsettling. Every time Ava came home, she heard the same phrases repeated. That land is increasing in value. That company is still interested. If we sell now, we'll get the best price. Mason started showing up more and more often. He no longer bothered hiding his excitement whenever the farm was mentioned. There was even a time when Ava saw him leading 2 men in business suits through the northern section of the property. When she asked about it, Mason simply smiled. "I'm looking for investment opportunities for the family." But there was something in his eyes that made Ava doubt every word he said. One morning in late September, a powerful storm swept through Ashwood. Several panels were ripped from the greenhouse roof. Ava spent the entire day making repairs. While moving an old wooden shelf against the wall, she discovered a small hidden space behind it. Inside sat a dusty metal box. Her heart immediately began to race. For reasons she could not explain, Ava had the feeling that her grandmother had intentionally left it there. Inside the box were a few old photographs, a bundle of yellowed letters, and a business card. Rebecca Grant, attorney at law. Beneath the card was a familiar handwritten note from Eleanor. "When you find this, call her." That very evening, Ava made the call. The woman on the other end remained silent for several seconds after hearing her name. Then she said something that sent a chill down Ava's spine. "I've been waiting for this call for years." 2 days later, Ava arrived at the attorney's office downtown. It was located inside an aging red brick building overlooking the town square. Rebecca Grant appeared to be in her 60s. Her silver hair was neatly tied back. She studied Ava for a long moment before opening the folder in front of her. "Your grandparents loved you far more than you realize," Rebecca said quietly. Then she placed a thick stack of documents on the desk. The numbers in front of Ava were almost impossible to believe. The farm, investment accounts, shares in a long-established agricultural genetics company. The total value was close to $3 million. Ava could barely breathe. Rebecca continued. 6 years ago, your grandparents established an irrevocable trust. Every major asset they owned was transferred into it. You are the sole beneficiary." The room seemed to tilt. Ava stared at the attorney in disbelief. "Does my mother know about this?" Rebecca shook her head. "No. And that was exactly what your grandparents wanted." She opened another file. Inside were copies of old journal entries. Thomas's handwriting covered every page. The more Ava read, the heavier her heart became. Years earlier, Diane had attempted to use the farm as collateral for a loan application that was denied. Mason had taken money from a family fund and invested it in a failed business venture. Thomas had documented everything, not with anger, but with disappointment. He loved his children, but he no longer trusted them. Rebecca looked directly at Ava. "Your grandfather once said something I'll never forget. If I leave this property to my sons and daughters, it will disappear within a year. If I leave it to Ava, it will survive for generations." Tears began to sting Ava's eyes. For the first time, she understood why her grandparents had spent years teaching her every small task on the farm. They were not teaching her because they needed help. They were preparing her. But Rebecca was not finished. She pulled another file from her desk. Just last week, Mason contacted the County Land Records Office asking questions about ownership. He has also met several times with representatives from a resort development company. Ava felt the blood drain from her face. "He's preparing to sell the farm." Rebecca nodded. "Not just preparing, As far as I know, he's already accepted a deposit. But there's one problem. He has never owned a single piece of that land. The truth struck like lightning. Mason was not simply trying to sell family property. He was trying to sell something that did not belong to him. Rebecca closed the folder. Over the next few months, they will pressure you. They will talk about family, about responsibility, about money. They may even make you feel guilty. Ava sat silently. She thought about her mother, the family dinners, the looks people exchanged whenever the farm was mentioned. Finally, she asked the question that had been weighing on her mind. What should I do? Rebecca calmly removed her glasses. Continue as if you know nothing. Let them keep believing you're just the young girl they've always underestimated, because sometimes your greatest advantage is not power. Sometimes it's the fact that the other side has no idea what you're really holding. And from that day forward, Ava began looking at her family through completely different eyes. She no longer saw relatives trying to save the future of the family. She saw people walking step by step toward a trap they did not even realize was waiting for them. For years, my family believed I was the easiest person to persuade. The quiet daughter, the kid who only knew how to work on a farm, the one who would nod and agree whenever the adults claimed something was best for the family. They were wrong. 3 months before Ava's 19th birthday, everything began to change, but she was the only one who noticed. After meeting with attorney Rebecca Grant, Ava returned to her normal routine as if nothing had happened. She still went to school. She still spent every weekend taking care of the farm. She still sat at the dinner table with her family every evening. But this time, she started paying attention. And what she saw made her heart grow colder with each passing day. Mason showed up almost every week. He carried new folders with him, held secret phone conversations, spent hours meeting privately with her mother. One evening at the beginning of winter, Ava walked downstairs to get a glass of water. The dining room light was still on. Mason sat across from Diane. The preliminary development plan has already been approved. He spoke with obvious excitement. If everything is finalized before summer, the value will increase even more. Diane glanced around before lowering her voice. What about Ava? Mason laughed. She'll sign. She doesn't understand the real value of that land. Ava stood silently behind the wall, her hands clenched so tightly that her fingers hurt. They still didn't understand, or perhaps they never wanted to. To them, the farm was money. To her, it was memories. It was family. It was a promise. Over the following weeks, the pressure intensified. Her mother constantly talked about debts, tuition costs, living expenses, Lily's future. Every conversation eventually returned to the same subject: selling the farm. One evening, Diane sat beside Ava on the couch. Her voice was softer than usual. You know, I always want what's best for this family. Ava remained silent. Diane continued. If we sell the land, everyone benefits. You, Lily, all of us. Ava looked at the woman sitting beside her. Diane truly believed what she was saying. Or perhaps she had repeated it to herself so many times that she could no longer tell the difference between right and wrong. A few days later, Mason asked Ava to meet him privately. He took her to a small cafe near the town square. After a few minutes of casual conversation, he placed an envelope on the table. Inside were numbers. $75,000. That's your share. Mason smiled. All you have to do is agree. Ava looked up at him. My share of what? For a brief moment, Mason's smile stiffened. The deal. The family's future. Ava quietly folded the envelope, then pushed it back toward him. I'll think about it. Mason left the cafe looking satisfied. He had no idea that Ava already knew everything. He had no idea that the young woman sitting across from him was the only person with the legal authority to determine the fate of the entire transaction. 1 week before her birthday, Rebecca called. It's time to prepare, she said calmly. The paperwork is almost complete. The moment you turn 19, your beneficiary rights will officially become active. That evening, Ava drove to the farm. Winter winds swept through the bare rows of trees. The wooden house stood beneath the fading light of sunset. She sat alone on the porch. The same porch where her grandfather used to sit. The same porch where her grandmother used to spend hours reading. For a moment, Ava wished things could have been different. She wished her mother had chosen family over money. She wished Mason had never allowed greed to control him. But deep down, she already knew neither wish would come true. Ava's birthday celebration was held on a Saturday afternoon. The house was packed with people. Relatives, neighbors, family friends. Laughter filled the living room. Balloons and flowers decorated every corner. Everything looked like the picture of a happy family gathering. But Ava knew this was Mason's final performance. After the birthday cake was served, Mason stood up. He raised his glass. "Today is a special day." He spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "And our family has some wonderful news to share." Every eye immediately turned toward him. Diane smiled. Lily looked excited. Mason continued, "We have all agreed to sell the family farm and create a better future for everyone." A few people began applauding. Then Ava stood up. The room instantly fell silent. She placed her fork on the table, then looked directly at Mason. "I never agreed to sell anything." The last remaining sound in the room disappeared. Mason blinked. The smile on his face froze. Diane immediately stepped in. "Ava, not now." But Ava remained standing. For the first time in years, she did not avoid confrontation. She did not stay silent. She did not give in. "If you want to tell the truth in front of everyone, then tell all of it." Mason began losing his composure. "You don't understand what you're doing." "No," Ava replied. "I understand exactly what I'm doing." And those words changed the expression on Mason's face, because for the first time, he realized something. The girl his entire family had underestimated might know far more than they ever imagined, much more. What Mason did not know was that, at that exact moment, the clock inside Ava's pocket was counting down toward the collapse of everything he had built. Less than one night remained. The plan he had spent years constructing was about to disappear, and by the following morning, the truth would finally come into the light. The morning after the birthday party, my entire family woke up, believing that the farm sale was finally about to be completed. None of them knew that within just a few hours, everything would fall apart. Early that morning, Ava sat alone in the familiar kitchen. A steaming cup of coffee rested in front of her. Outside the window, the first rays of sunlight stretched across the rolling hills of Ashwood. The landscape looked peaceful, just as it always had, but beneath that calm surface, a storm was waiting to erupt. Around 9 o'clock, Ava's phone rang. It was Rebecca Grant. Her voice was as calm as ever. "Everything is complete. Your beneficiary rights have been activated. The legal notice has been officially recorded. No one can transfer or sell the farm without your approval." Ava slowly closed her eyes. The moment had finally arrived. At that same time, inside the county land records office, Mason sat confidently at the filing counter. He was dressed professionally. His expression was full of confidence. The clerk entered the property's information into the system, then suddenly stopped. The expression on her face changed. "I'm sorry. This property is controlled by a trust." Mason laughed. "You must be mistaken." "No," the clerk replied. "These records have existed for years, and this morning an additional notice was filed confirming the beneficiary." The smile vanished from Mason's face. He grabbed the documents. "Read them again." Then read them a second time. But the result never changed. He had never owned any part of the farm. Not a single acre. Not a single tree. Not a single legal right to make decisions about it. When Diane received the call from her brother, she nearly dropped her phone. 2 hours later, both of them stood in front of Ava. Mason no longer carried the confidence he had displayed the day before. Diane looked pale. "What did you do?" she asked. Ava looked at her mother for a long moment. For the first time in years, she did not feel angry, only sad. "I accepted what Grandma and Grandpa left for me." Mason slammed his hand onto the table. They couldn't do this to their family. But even as he said the words, he knew he was lying. Because deep down, he understood better than anyone. Thomas had seen all of this coming years earlier. Things became even worse that afternoon. The resort development company contacted Mason. They demanded an explanation for why he had signed agreements involving property he did not own. Then the phone calls began pouring in. Lawyers, banks, business partners. Everyone seemed to arrive at once. Over the following weeks, Mason's life unraveled rapidly. Failed investments were exposed. Old financial obligations resurfaced like debts that had never disappeared. He was forced to sell multiple assets to deal with the consequences. The reputation he had spent years building disappeared just as quickly. Meanwhile, Ava said very little. She never celebrated. She never told her story to anyone. Because deep down, she had never viewed any of this as a victory. Late one afternoon in April, Ava returned to the farm. The apple trees were beginning to bloom. The air carried the scent of damp earth and fresh grass. Everything looked exactly like the springs before, except her grandparents were no longer there. While cleaning Thomas's old office, she discovered an envelope tucked inside the final drawer of his desk. The handwriting on the front was instantly familiar. For Ava, her heart began to pound. Her hands trembled as she opened the letter. Inside were only a few short lines. "I knew there would come a day when you would read this. If that day has arrived, it means you kept your promise. I loved my children, but they always looked at this land through its price. You looked at it through its memories." Then Ava reached the final sentence, the words that brought tears falling onto the paper. "I didn't choose you because you were the strongest. I chose you because you were the only one who asked whether the apple trees would survive the winter before asking how much they were worth." Ava broke down in tears. Not because of the money, not because of ownership, but because, for the first time, she finally understood the real reason. Her grandparents had never left her an asset, they had left her their trust. A few weeks later, Lily came to the farm on her own. She brought 2 pizzas and sat beside Ava on the old wooden porch. "I'm sorry." Lily spoke so softly that it was almost a whisper. "I thought you were being selfish." Ava smiled. "You didn't know what was really happening." The 2 sisters sat together watching the sun disappear behind the rows of trees. For the first time in years, there was no distance between them. That summer, Ava enrolled in environmental science and land resource management. She decided to spend most of her time living on the farm, a place that had once been a childhood memory and had now become her true home. A few months later, Diane called her daughter. The conversation was brief. There were no arguments, no pressure, only simple questions and quiet concern. Their relationship was not completely healed, but at least the healing had begun. One morning in early autumn, Ava sat alone on the porch. A thin layer of mist drifted across the apple trees. The sun slowly rose in the distance. She thought about Thomas. She thought about Eleanor. She thought about everything that had happened, and then she understood something. The most valuable thing her grandparents had left behind was never the farm. It was the ability to recognize the difference between something that has value and something that is truly valuable. Many people spend their entire lives chasing numbers, only to lose the things money can never buy. My family needed years to learn that lesson, and fortunately, I still had the chance to hold on to what mattered most. If you're listening to this story, ask yourself one question. If you had to choose between money and a promise made to someone you loved most, which would you choose? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can join me for the next one. Because sometimes the things that protect us most powerfully are not possessions. They are acts of love quietly prepared long before the storm ever arrives.